One seeing like months ago, so.
You're gonna. Yeah.
Social face crime, people on faces contradictory, confusing, and turning around system and needed to clarify during control speed. Minimum investment in complex multinational commercial face measuring for COVID-19. Basic international law, convention, major jurisdictional behavior can be protection, confusion, discouragement, and community care to assess mental health, community challenges, lack of meaning to me. Indian Frenchman, business manager, another one, multiple sources, make offensive civilizing, and investment system needed for investment for confidence. So there's information patterns are key. The space industry is unique and connections like the opportunities for space tech research data center processing and around is new 23. 10 million public space on these recommendations and references establishing the emerging effective impacts on these space one. We have recognized the blue very different investments as research national quality design investments in America. And pretty, you got kids are supposed to be 24. What the fuck is the revolution is already local interactions, baseball with possible problem Private collection trees are used to trees house we cover the elements of this not the attraction to see demonstrated use of not island space included. No shades of one the OC is because space over the fair to weather. No beach and half of the shop to be said critical fair shows much to the range of the OC is of lots of it and maintain. I don't know what the shows to run and be there once you say the action but I don't think the public is so cool and thinking about this the reason for the Actually, space center, the construction of the truck, this is the most dimension of the follow the impulse, how the present the most space products, internal specialization of organized special national law, 119. Oh, that's what I saw. If it's mentioned, I was mentioned to apply to Luke 23. I mentioned in person having given national law between differences of one law and the other one country is country, not a jurisdiction. This space is something national law, you said extra. Like the same response to the case law, like the most of the national and USMS, to lead that for self to US to go away with global and on eventual and national base on achievement of agree. House 22. To be effective was into the country global and international that about all the work pros and actors and even national standards for sustainable states, that national state representatives for future and national like the girls global and establish a national set of laws and the global money and instead of doing like active personal use, never percentage of Indians and the being countries to do first, never global money use and trade use by all the corporate spaces, corporations, getting for something these, double pushing for attention, it was 22. Based on basic lesson in the future of the space center with the history and subordination, it is necessary especially in time to return all the issues and securing and looking deeper in coordination and resources and communication and sort of any method even other to do with resource and the evidence missions of the organization financial experience to bring all that to not representing also even the organization the release person was arise and to involve in the coordination space Moses are expressed in the country because of the political human health overuse and the resources having the necessary to the community and the family training center development of generation of West operations and advances to pursue and remember faster than the rate of BBC.
Are you on? Ross? Okay, how do you increase domestic patents in outer space? Isn't that extraterritorial?
No, we increase regulation on what is considered infringement on patents for outer space related technology.
Within the United States. So how
Yes.
do you comply with the OST? How does it change?
Sure, we've heard evidence that if we close this plaza convenience legal loophole, then in turn it will result in strengthening the OST. It would show the US's commitment to governance in space in the outer space treaty. We've heard evidence that we think that other countries who are also currently working in space have an incentive to join onto that treaty as well.
So how do you close this legal loophole?
Sure, we make it illegal to infringe on IP for so the problem we've read cards about is that other companies are going, they're leaving the US and infringing on US IP, and there's a legal loophole that says that they're able to do that. It's not technically considered infringement. The act changes that to make that infringement, which in turn strengthens patents
Okay,
and
so
makes it.
if other countries are infringing on our.
It's not countries, it's companies.
Other companies, okay, companies aren't these companies based in multiple countries, how do you regulate their importance of their?
If they infringe on US IP, they are penalized for it. The app doesn't have to regulate other companies, that would be ridiculous, that's a crazy app.
Okay, is the plan model?
Does the plan model, like, what do you
Do other
mean?
countries copy the plan?
We think that other countries would, if they have space technology and like a reason to join the OST would. Our cards say EU, Japan, China, and Russia are most likely to want to join onto this revitalized OST.
Okay, would China follow on?
Yeah, I just said that.
Why would China follow on?
It's not a follow-on argument, it's an argument that they would want to revisit the principles of the OST because it would now be updated.
Okay. Sure, so the internal link to Advantage One is the only internal link like encouraging new innovations in like technology, or is there any other?
The internal link to the scenarios in Advantage One is about the output of technology that is.
So like innovation in space flight technology?
Yes.
Okay, that's right. Okay, the second advantage, it's just about compliance with the OST.
It's a kind of a governance argument. We've said that specifically, we think that other countries want to not weaponize space, but they're doing so because there's no like international framework to stop them. Like, or.
Okay, how does domestic action create an international?
Sure, we have really good cards that say that when we strengthen our IP, we can model that for other countries, i.e. other countries look to us for like a haven for IP law because our IP law is so dense and it is so like it's worked so well in the past. So other countries would look to us and see that as a revitalization of the OST.
I mean, you said that our IP law is dense, so that means it's complex, or that be more difficult for these other countries with different patents.
It's just like RIP is, I don't remember the wording of the card, but it's like RIP is the prime system to be used for other countries, because it's worked so well in the past. Like dense as in like it's complex, it's not like anything that's just allowed to happen.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep, all right, the one C sent, the order is. Send it off in the commercial space and then space.
I'm sorry.
There we got it.
Sorry, mine's still down.
The word enemy throughout that's one of his native totally effective weather patterns about neg limits protection single sex infinite ground tiny house by dealing some concepts like competitive Asian like one classification classes mechanism size and cannibals. Next up. The Nazis but fully commit to new United Nations general global space policy including but not limited to ratifying the implementing treaties that show the protection to national space outer space patterns around authors advocate for the credible walking to the domestic IP action fails on international activity that prevents effective space colonization and innovation. Want to see how we do 19. Obvious space every question also legal from short of sport and for big space activities application to territorial occupied space problematic space work cover territorial definition towards appropriation principle was regarding soccer claims failure expression creates uncertainty investments in technological gospel which space budget and the defense supply to generate temporary conflict with non-corruption principles unquestionable prohibition category and oppressive and all of the physical economic claims as part of the panel beyond the scope of government opportunity other secret for commercial environmental international space law think clear center regulation commercial space activities allowing to consider national fully all EU treaties and national European treaties, also lock in the space of audience in terms of others, lead policy is the pace at which will proceed through the universe. And the plan submits USC to plus positive creates unique risks that lock in only seating authority in large bodies. Souls, what I say Hamilton 22. Rapid development of space that places Wilson sector humanities feature requires space tech that these space will keep greater rest of the actions while other girls will be taking space launch and avoid shooting zero gas many actions to risk private avenues achieving accessible security legal controversy with examples of the global environment, all of commercial enterprise geopolitical advantages, pushing itself, and was essential in Sweden one, supporting essential according to purchase space, the load of consideration on given the support of action with essential pressure space law, because like actions with attachments and virtual action to international global good aspects of the response and tracks the national coordination answer, align individuals with management to well-being access to risk mechanism, question space law, and sexual and making something the feature of the entire mission stakes to and then the loss of elements like some loss of huge human and also digital lack of the equivalent collective action problems, problematic special groups of international security, a lot of potential problematic space conflicts or international coordination to make decision making, other words, a larger gives us to do times problems, reaching access security because making explosive parties to do with a source of vexes with other authority humanity, while even laws, it's not something of us that can be forced over as unfortunately contaminated materials, while the place, commercial national will be offered media game, logical response to special will and access to response, some of the state of national territory modification, attack back, intimidation, reflect, military geopolitical conflict, developing new actual territorial extraterrestrial settlements around the West Asia, response to states to be like religion, rescue management, monitoring of our payloads, friendly development, space personal dangers, economic acceleration disruption. Next up. The United States federal government should not weaponize put weapons in space explicitly incentive to do so. Read from instruments the outer space treaty or establish Article 6 of the outer space treaty self-executing, establish an off-patent innovation process and successful inventions areas not included to microgravity research and space manufacturing proposal technology. Make one sole weaponization, other nations only ask space weapons system we do, and only two claim to solve Article 6 violation of the recall biology credibility issue. 1AC, 17. With my votes, represent my country, like credibility, we know, comply, however, 6 of 2%, some countries for 100 Russians, but our credibility for religious, comfortable, IOC, obligation, what the US companies first, we were looking what they were saying, and classified into, OC, what credibility, sets up these parties in the same process, price solved, 120. President patents only instead of policymakers or innovation to cause research grants, tax subsidy patents, good purpose instead of monopoly rights of all hands to command of opportunity, public panel law, plus uniform and leverage, patent law, discourage patent tech, approaching well with national security. Next up. The United States will limit constitutional convention called at least 34 states were at least 38 to the state, significantly strengthening potential domestic outstate patents. It solves causes following avoids politics. Group 21. Congress passed the states that convention around at least 3 quarters of Congress group. Unwilling that was just one shot of convention Congress after put on an amendment of the product act work today for industry. I run by Article 5 for limited purposes. Next up. Tax cuts passed now, House and Senate Republicans are 30 careful needle bends and in 3410. House Republicans passed much bills should align the House and Senate to get a big issue for $4 trillion. Tax increase, how members allow bills make this turbulence ahead. Servers are not accept one of members consider the don't give out for a needle. Failure is not an option. Because done by Memorial Day. Patents Rec PC, Article 14. In patent policy term as a PC regarding passing new legislation to practice property, the patent statute will statute of the social provision consider advancing statutes needs, courts of possession of child patent laws, and tax policy key to occupy China's 24. Or new respected worth expression Trump tax like all American vendors who discovered that exchange changing idea and ensures American self competitive China business like that's 20% R&D provides corporate welfare over 20% R&D is the amount of e-companies across the R&D restoring industrial reach $70 billion in R&D support 21 million jobs extinction R&D 21. China new sector base on our year is SCS can lead to war new tactics on some leadership pounds of power. We're going to major war from the US Commission attack US, but come to the defense, Great Space Nuclear War, from regional conventional public Washington, retire China's quadruple arsenal, risk is real. Next off, the United States federal government on international public necessity compels shipping expansion of domestic outer space planetary, is intellectual property protection, exclusive providing excellence for shipping production domestic outer space patents, and finding necessity doctrine to IP solves and revitalist pandemic response. 21. Goods and responsible public health provide flexible property rights for performing result for crisis protected goods to operating into the liability is the only one shepherd good or treasure there's little incentive use of time out credit in terms of ability means works to these documents flexible solution nothing conduct liability such costs is not right well access to protect attack without permission for necessity for the doctrine as for the doctrine necessarily come into act everybody manage disaster provides potentials any liability resulting in good purpose not be law constantly just as amount of liability and support decision of other doctrine related become making board and statute there are no doctrinal impediments occupants connection with just its extinction. Diamond is 22. We have to find out if it's an academic work for next the human rights cancer, resulting in completion of that civilization and extinction of variants, mutation of a bar, we can't antibodies, carbon will be setting on the time of the viruses when the operation is how they have up to planet Earth. Commercial space. Zero inheritance in the Space Force, commercial space strategy revitalizes the US leadership, the government partnership, the commercial industry, USSF, 24. This was the commercial space strategy, political doing commercial partnership, the BC competitive management, vulnerable management, and the servers, launch of operational commercial care, pivotal and great space service and activities, for all some reform commercial, and should be setting for next space economy rather than lower words and combat people architecture, leverage American national technologies, advantages, and space, basic Chinese moving regards such as challenges in space and firmly partnering with China, commercial space out of zone answer, national security, what other capabilities, South American, Australian innovation, and about recommended markets. And the rock one never kill us, Long Bridge 28. Hello, Station Amendment without Bashford Command, Media Cover Mars, who is a bowl of the reason to be with humans versus next situation, rock on abundant, not to hold us, whatever it is, fair amount of the cat, task with 7.8 billion people, military ability, community, and health, speech, media, aptitudes, and so forth, or tools, and I give a decade water for national community, since I've been salvation, good experience. And, physiological psychological limits, Action 21. Not an approved to incorporate as any patient visitor, reduce the psychological physiological range radiation, UV, X-ray, gamma rays, human psychology, pressure, could be anything good as result in death. And concede to text disable satellites. Those satellites are massive light pollution compared to light polluting sources from Giano 21. Actual numbers in terms of the constellation satellite to divide it out of the class and apply that with the physical term of light pollution cities goes by 10% of actual water out of the using the cosmos dark fast sky the ground flow by any other standards of light pollution like street lights on satellites increasing as well as sky low space lights and Amazon putting satellite and light pollution the next global eco catastrophe boil 19. Everyone's social environmental climate change and scale and reach change the animal migration, breeding, production, pollination, disease, like lava, research, study how like cascade the entire ecosystem living spaces for all that is info, telling workers want to see climate migrate and reproduce impact whole population eco systems for comments for items of genesis and select relation back to TH in the or community not to live like not negative consequences well, which will study around well cascade that changes and target the biological work that lasts around all and events water place made with sound metal it's algae over so it's impossible to manage a problem and environmental cost of 6,000 corporate to the world. Science spending massive biology loss massive climate disruption of people's massive restriction complex such a global system because of the return lead to ecological sustainability of policies to more deadly pandemic so enough more finished with the consolidation aside from the business here solutions in this memory service the by the end of the decade brought the thousand scientists market scientists space law inconvenient criteria says that OSU act law source credibility matters and not like what position is still breaking international law crunches women as committed to the arms rights access and potential sanctions about mechanisms check more than slight increasing credibility in existing mechanisms like hotlines checking the escalation space and cyber like sterile or rosy or fatigue what occurs today to determine the hotline to discuss potential closure of the approach or test to keep something that is escalating space on earth and dedicated hotlines there's the Russian US and no international law Trump and his tariffs and US credibility cooperation over an era and the OST's credibility is a key diplomacy on the international obvious better facility cooperation Hickman 7 the treaty is going to be flexible once the treaty and force to keep the most good that we also need a lot of what's all the states should never be over territory can do well, but old fashioned way to negotiate with sovereign states. I don't finish that quote I marked on the impact of it. About lots of difficult things in action, department of aviation, so legend, scale surveillance, cross experts, market experts, like all the more words. It was the same part. I just want to look at part of Mars.
No, the like physiological barriers.
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that?
It was that like.
Okay. Alright, you good?
Yep.
Okay, status of please.
Start with all adoption.
Can you skip anything, like off page?
Definitely.
Okay. Sorry. That was good. Okay, let's talk about the UN counter plan. The audio evidence. Like all the way down, it says revamping UN treaties is the ultimate outcome. You've shrunk the part of the card that specifically says that it's only some people who believe that to be true, and then he goes on to conclude that the solution solves nothing. What do you think this gets you?
I mean, you can read it behind if you want. I don't think it hurts it.
Well, it definitely does. It literally says the
It
solution.
also
totally doesn't
continues to
all
allow
different-
national gaps, aka the plan, to fill the gaps left by UN treaties.
Okay, the counter plan, it commits to a new UN agenda, like, is that just every country in the UN? Is that like a new organization, like a new treaty?
Are you asking if we fiat?
Yes,
We fiat the United States federally.
so you fiat them going to the UN and proposing the treaty.
Yeah, we fiat them or
Why would
we
countries
fiat the
say, why
UN.
would countries say yes to that?
The exact same reason they would say yes to the plan.
Well, there's
So
no.
the US
Yes, the plan, because the OST is an old piece of legislation that like people are able to trust. This is brand new. Why would they want this?
Your evidence says that we'll go to the deficit when we extend this into law, but your evidence talking about the US setting a domestic focal or a focal point on future space policy is enough to get other nations to agree and follow on. That is the exact same thing as the counterplan, except instead of doing territorial and domestic IP laws.
Does it make the US side be the focal point of the treaty?
Yeah, that's not what this counterplan is doing either. We're
It
signing on-
doesn't or does?
Okay, it's talking about international IP, we sign on to the UN's agenda, or like, yeah, currently.
Okay, so it's not the US as a focal point. Gotcha.
No, it is because the US starts the process. Same as
Can you pick blanks?
Yeah.
You can.
what?
Can you pick blanks?
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine. This pricing system, how would that work for like stopping the prize from being stolen?
that's for the second advantage, right?
Or the first, the one about innovation, the first. advantage.
Yeah, the prizes claim solve the first advantage because your internal links to that advantage in like space colonization are about R&D funding.
No, it's about how people don't want to innovate because they're
Because-
afraid of their IP being stolen. How do you stop?
Yeah,
it?
exactly. So the prizes system replaces the incentives for patents. Like sure,
Do you-
patents are broken out. You don't have to fix this. We just add.
Do you get rid of patents?
No, but even if the system
So
remains.
you
it's
don't
broken.
freeze patents.
Because
Is
we
there-
institute a new system for incentives that's an off-patent system, which replaces the need for patents.
Alright,
But they can still get money and incentives to R&D.
Obviously, patent, like, there's been a bunch of patent expansions since 2014. Like, what do you think the threshold is for?
Yeah, we're talking about politics.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, we're talking about the current political climate or the current political agenda is focused on passing tax cuts
That's
and the
not a
budget bill.
question, Pat, like,
Yeah.
there's
Even
so
though there's been
much
other
patent
passages of
expansion.
patents, it's about extending PC now and the fights that patents reform would cause now. Because that takes the bill, passes bill, that's like, again, being debated now.
Why would Trump have to spend IP on, or sorry, why would Trump have to spend PC on, like, whatever it's.
Okay.
Like, next time we get to, UN is internal,
Yeah,
is that it?
yeah, this is the one too.
Okay. And then what's the next one, sixties, managed counterpoint?
As of now, just politics.
Okay, cool.
Uh,
Could you brought us in?
Yeah.
Here's order is gonna be commercialization. Space law. Peace offsets. The con counterpoint. The advantage counterpoint. The UN counterpoint. Necessity. And then policy.
so I'm all the document. Most probably.
Big pattern one phase is unclear and contradictory, synthesizing innovation and investment. The axon are creating a clear and certain framework for space science. Innovation is key to impacts one microgravity. Harvard materials from induced matter all spill over to structural tech. Cells every action of planets cause me to choose space calls. So the active nuclear war plays super volcanoes, asteroids, super weapons, ritual wars, and all other extreme events. Column and Neptune. One and C. One is the space force. It doesn't solve microgravity, which is a key internal link to colonization. The one and C2 is the no impact. So the part of power tank. Just like the impacts are long term, but it's inevitable from super weapons and asteroids. And 1C3 is physiological problems which are overcome by our innovation in the microgravity field. 1C4 is the churn, group it. It makes zero sense. One, there's no link. It isn't about cyber attacks. It wouldn't take down these satellites. Two, even if space war would decrease the amount of satellites, it wouldn't decrease all of them. And if they got to that point, then it would cause a huge weaponization and escalate to war before we were actually able to remove all the satellites. And 1C and for Hayes proves that the app would solve light pollution, which solves the terminal on space law. Space law and the OST are weak now. The plan provides that recurring domestic space time was the focal point for global patent regime 2 would impact one weaponization called space arms race. We would to conflicts, ASATs, and scale arms control, that's hard time 2, scarcity, terrorism, national warming, all independent cause distinction, absent incredible OST. That's Pelton. 1 NC 1 doesn't assume the US currently violating the OST, which will cause it to collapse. 1 NC 2 is literally 10 years out of date and doesn't assume new ASATs, which could lead to accidental war and miscalc. 1 NC 3 are Henry Card explicitly assumes Trump and says that he can create cooperation internationally. 1 NC 4 in diplomacy isn't our internal link, it's just about cooperating over space, which the OC is in a position to do, but only if updated. T. 1 would be plain text to vacuum only directed option 2. We may affect all times in space 3 counter turbulation limits within this is the core meaning. Part 7. In core meaning within and courts found to be the obvious meaning. Column 52. No word about the word in needs within the limits of opposite word in some through every not aware of any authority from science the meaning to word in. Fourth word applicability only we have evidence from the courts which how the accident works legally is gold standard for precision. The overlimiting their interpretation after 3 aspects after on C delegation of subspace are uniquely good. Their interpretation limits that out. A G functional limits PTO straight up patents the calculate course calculate politics and every other all counterplane solves every F5 for reusability. Human interpretation cause some kind of erase the bottom. One part of shields, threat of convention shields as half of opposition, Barnett, 09. And among its position is to be able to take some way to bring new congressmen to the big threat, that is the real congress versus 17 amendment. Two perfectly kind of just sort of cost timelines are a voting issue, but don't understand the time they want to see in her targetation, covering the core controversy of IPR protection. Three part of the act and establish the constitutional convention, countertimes, must be textually and functionally vetted, it's the only directed option. For delay, every single counterpoint wastes 100 trillion future lives expected, the counterpoint takes 2,000 years, by bar 4. Yet a supermajority of both the government and the report of the state to agree to make no order responsible last amendment initially proposed in the 17 years old removed in the 1990s for through centuries. Five constitutional changes failed. Society supplements them and courts to the final say. Strauss 1. Constitutional amendments to the President of arrange their Christian national holidays change matter to not order. However, 5 amendments or requirements changes that are taking place in the federal society case so with the application statute declaration 10 doesn't come back and mature democracy then a rule of form of amendment adopted in supermajority. States comprehensive plans are voting issue ain't not real world. What has been called since the 1700s not real world nor educational costs in 15. Unchanged the Constitution will have to be massive grants only grown up public so like this 24 speculating about. Be particularly we don't know which states call for the convention or vote for the amendment, which means you can't go off and stuff the substance. How about the counterclaim mechanism? The advantage counterclaim. One proposed shields, 2 cons of better kills restrictions, class 7 material for the least covered option, kills fairness, if to be wasted, and possibly absence results, purpose theory, you can pick it, 3 purposes plan any combination of planks, 4 consult based law, updating the patent system is key to the OST, 1 to see how judo insert for reference, 5 it doesn't solve commercialization, the space industry is unique, but 1 to see loop insert for reference, B flexible convenience, companies will launch from other countries to avoid punishment for infringement, international patent regime is key, Malman insert for reference, and 5 government spending guts and space sector to consult tech development, regulations, distortion, confusion, cruise 21. Master distortion, diversion, resource rejuvenation, culture, funding, government studying, science, and tech government, segregation, relevant government sponsored enterprise, public private partnership, the government already kind of product, the spending on creative, spending with attachment of regulatory strings, and diversion of tech activities and distortion, creates tensions and confusions over IB states with federally funded discoveries, basic work, plan research, which the government, first industry science, federal funding, needs larger government in the private sector, means organic tech interests, and non-agricultural, but also has been used in downstream industries. And even if the U.S. Privately decides not to weaponize, they can't solve Russia or China. The only the OST is solved. That links to the benefit or can't solve because diplomacy is the quo. Without kind of protection, this isn't seen as credible. That's one I see Alvadudo, the UN. 1 permit 2 permit the counterclaim, 3 cross supply all the patents, keywords from the advantage counterclaim, 4 the UN fails, the opportunity part goes out. It may provide ancient short-term may also lead to conflicting national laws and thereby incentivizing other practices such as lack of convenience. A solution hardly addresses all the concerns during commercial innovation and intellectual property facing that of outdated international rules may in fact work against their development. And 5 the app solves they don't assume the cooperation of the second advantage, which would still be having through U.S. mechanisms. It's just also followed on by other countries. It's not seen as unilateral, so there's no internal net benefit necessity. 1 permit goes shields, 2 permits the counterclaim, 3 permits the claim the United States program which define the torture of public necessity must strengthen, narrowing can never include providing exclusivity, must be textually competitive, 4 case solve commercialization, lack of clarity, Hello 21. Necessary document balancing to respond to emergency and need to bring water and send to invest in the very tech important time parts of running with the actual necessity challenge. If finding related skirts, ease of it in the matter of copyrights and impact, evaluate by is final way that is starting and fail to protect. They send those emergency use and innovation problems finding necessity for the strengthening context of AIDS. And can solve the law advantage, cross-by patents are key. And 5, pandemics will cause human extinction, part 17. Natural pandemics are very unlikely to cause human extinction in species human and relevant percent, or infectious disease, non-globally distortion, other factors that contribute to our species and numerous person capable of rational response very likely to kill off natural pandemic highly lethal pathogens, kill their hosts before they are spread to the various potential pathogens, not be highly lethal politics. 1 prevail and para equity now, Michael 24. In the next conversation, we possible advanceability of the company development a lot of work to do with the administration comes in, helping the comment of the real movement for some kind of performance feelings to the agenda for the administration lead in. 2 will pass, House moderates, so I vote 410. Company after legislation will have a budget to max bill changes only we're looking to control passing the budget, House holder, Republicans are all over cutting for the re-election of our speech conservatives, although the budget resolution cannot go far enough when they're freedom practice considering us. And 3 tariff them, number goes 4-8. Upstairs, starting the head is beautiful, everyone leaders hope money for taxes to come from economic growth, and also subject factor in a new revenue and tariffs to bring the nation down the stairs and I make sure in Trump legislation. 4, bipartisan IPR efforts gives Trump the win that builds bridges with Democrats. 24, dual British and them supporting a bipartisan IPR will open up potential quick win for Trump. And 5, solve the impact of increases development. There are internal link evidence just as the bill would allocate more defense spending, which the app would actually solve. And 7, the China isn't threatening U.S. emerging tech leadership. Lewis 24. No single check is a good indicator of national power. The U.S. economy is the absolute centralized, guided by an actively competitive market system, exceptionally innovative for decades in the story, but the U.S. falling behind its predictable form, delivery under World War II, predicting the China which place the U.S. in these ratings were wrong, saying they come to do the wrong things. They relied on picking their proxy indicator provide any direct measurement and technological success result good answer to China losing 30% of technology to 44 is not a plan of the U.S. center of development average coming from technology and biotech and alcoholics and co-products and black and quantum and GPT technology from the first U.S. to China's lead is open question in 23. And space is a political issue. Race what to play. Reading 24. What are the rights of American public and difficulty and avoid becoming part of the political issue by his sovereign wholesale from the Trump administration and patent laws bipartisan. Nelson 24. Patent laws was bipartisan agreement evidence by NDCA and Para. Mark Nelson and Para. I'm good for us.
What was that, Nelson?
Nelson. 24.
Brilliant. Moving now. First on the Lewis card on the politics DA flow, why is this not uniqueness for the impact scenario?
Well, it specifically says that there's no way that China can get ahead of the US. And that it's actually not a threat to US national power. The indicators that people
That's what
use to
they
measure
have
US
right
power.
now. The tax cuts reverse that. So how does that apply?
That's not how it was described in the one NC. The one NC scenario says that it's key to outcompete China. We
Okay,
think
that's fine.
that we are already outcompeting China, and so the tax policy is.
First card, the Para Prevail number. It says in the next Congress it'll get passed, correct?
That is what it says.
Does that not mean it can get passed at any time this year?
It says that Trump is currently prioritizing it and using.
What does that say?
It says there is a real commitment from.
Does that mean he's currently prioritizing it?
It says this administration is leaning in. It is currently
Just
helping the
just-
Congress.
Just to clarify, not currently, correct?
No, currently.
Where does it say that in the card?
Well, it says that there's a lot of work to do, but the administration is now coming in and helping to try and push the para into surveillance.
WAPO card, or you did read the WAPO card, right? What
I
else? What's the warrant for why moderates don't like the bill?
They see cutting benefits as putting them at risk of reelection because their voting base would be upset if they lost Social Security or Medicare.
You're in power plan. What was the last thing you said on it? I didn't catch it.
The
It's
app would
not
solve
easy.
because it wouldn't be perceived as unilateral.
The app solves what?
An internal.
And what was the only deficit was the re-highlight of the card, right?
Yeah.
And what's the
Oh,
word?
and we cross-applied all the patents key.
How does that apply to this kind of plan? We use patents.
We think that the clarity of specifically the one I see obligator card says that you need a clear system of patents in
Why
order.
is the counterplay not good?
Well, it's not fair because the counterplan is with the UN's IP treaty. We have said that space patents in the US is specifically key.
What's the warrant for that?
Well, the obligator card says that using the OXT is what allows other countries to follow on to US mechanism.
Why is the OSTP? Again, what's the warrant for OST?
Well, it's been around for 60 years, but it hasn't been updated. It's currently holding back our weaponization, which proves that it is effective.
Okay, I want to talk about
That
the
is being
re-highlight of the obligator, the re-highlight of the obligator card. The first line you said, although it may provide answers, how is that not referencing national laws? If you read those 217.
It says.
It says it may also lead to conflicting national laws. That's talking about territorial domestic IP laws.
Well, yeah, we think we shouldn't have territorial domestic IP laws.
So that's
We
what
think-
that is.
No, we think that it would create follow-on by the
But it's
OSC by
still
creating
domestic
regulatory.
territorial IP law. You can get causes follow. Right. Yeah. How many minutes started? That's all my conclusion.
The Hayes Code.
upfront. Sorry. Mhm. He, you and kind of played on calling the case. And then the case is just ordered, please. You and on the case for the case. Conceded A's by Philip, just by A's is voting into the impact is ground and dies mechanism. This has lost 2C arbitrarily big different rate. Just by got legs, skills, counterplay competition, you all on topic of zero generics interpretation. Any job arguments in 2C do not get new one of your answers or cross application. Prefer one is flowing, increases more, but keep debating two, same back increases the app, save options with one of your sizes of the block to respond in case of 5, 10, top student creates late breaking debate, skills, class credits, outweighs conduct because they cheated first, and no reasonability, theory, prolific step for critical thinking, and it's not sort of because they do not because interpretation must send out the text any theory, T interpretation to anything else certified should be or not, and simpleness and lying, and we saw that, which proves that they dropped it. UN counterplan solves their international treaty with UN, it's what their own authors advocate for domestic action fails to otherwise effective space call and innovation. That's there are two frames, it's one sufficiency, deficits must have impact or unquantifiable, two just take logical extension of conduct, refer to both, one the counterplan's goal use offense defense analysis, there's only risk that is where something flips back two, at least that benefit territorial IP lines counterplan are incompatible. That's one to see attitude the first thing domestic IP inhibits international activity by conflicting with the non-appropriation principle that locks in extras in space 3 the plans best to protect 5 piece and the counterplan simultaneously supporting our caution neither space pattern team intelligence devices and cost countries say no. What's he forward to do? Fourth thing power to be effective for facts must convince on the question follow recognition of the national team for which part takes can distribute by like West Flag blood for Terry Swag by protecting the public any other to think global sport page finding which is not essential set international paper and more space and people that do international set for objects stable stage acts must be max factor interest for the campaign is average protected for class paging sorry. Okay, yeah. One is mandate domestic IP laws, not international, exclusively applied within the U.S. Local, with the international countries, states, and media countries, again, other countries, interpretation, transfer, across multiple countries, by skin, within the application of treaty is not basic law. Avoid with the application of treaty, not basic law. Two joint resolution gives regards both from the chambers. And again, 97. Federal government fees all that's government 3 theme is whole. What's 24? These projects and principle ratification doesn't do that. Which four? Of the secretary subject speaking of one that I put to act to resolve across in the house. I'll say that. Legislative issue for building resolve house rules and domestic and then patents. It doesn't matter because we also have patents. Domestic action is not key. The first part of their index literally critiques U.S. domestic action, and also the second part of their index says that space laws are outdated now, but the template makes them not outdated. And the reason they stop is reason we do too. The next say is inquiry and their evidence advocates for U.S. acceptance over the other countries follow on to, but it makes zero distinction between domestic law and U.S. We're both focal point internationally. As long as the U.S. experts are also concedes the U.S. and templates obviously want to see both index by domestic patent to include international agreements. One thing going to do. Recognizing supernatural private laws being based upon state circuit. Like this law, international agreement, but I know that every goes for the great time between international space between state just of the chapter, but all of them use one by the right now, seeing all the United States government also to use stuff to see that regular best exchange and all the states and one national between contract rules and the fact that these from the states like the great national that was what state use the actually from international that was what federal government use except these something international space and each other. The act does not solve their own evidence that the decentralized US policy is basically to execute trying to force other centralized nations like China to bend to our ability to face incoherence to national badly different and that is their whole app. That's Hamilton. Also, I can make probably so just get that pulled up. Concon solves those of federal action through unified state bargaining. That's Cougar 2 frames 1 sufficiency frame depth out of that above two both one links to the manhattan if it still includes all no shield because it perceives government action currency the government service for the act funded by government national on top of government states or not federal state action the foreground deck problem confused areas and infinite other issues not sort of linkage to plan cross line with delay initiation and long set signals that solves all the words to ratify don't quickly Jackson 1 it does not fail. Fiat solves durability ensures that there's no shutdown or counter mechanisms. It's reciprocal with the app. It's limited. Convention solves all the next states. Look, convention are going to take theory to justify confidence theory. No, it's worth using people that ground reject non-resolution. Actually, no. Predictable neck actually just strike out litigation theory. Number 2, one neck like I say is intended to launch topic based on memory theory. 2 is more common than election glycing. 14, I think from 2 and 3 concourse sports common elections. 3 no after there actually back out 1 counter 4 they defend the process of ground exists. I'll be 18 calls article on there from left as well to right. The follow on Congress in the seats of the state is constitutional test. Cooper it solves all the deficit ball during one spills up. I believe 16 then states of the Congress its own amendment. Then conditionality different space use side by mass top includes the intellectual property rights top space description more than one negative vision according to Steve state person set agreement risk for space capital to around groups and educating grid the way to app innovation only way to improve plans understanding the opportunity cost absent lagging of huge up the opportunity is next school aspects in dark and the represent topic debate give reaction to it are the 2 are the constitutes get low playing field before we take the arguments of the team solve the opportunity we get what we got no offense one air negative 2 see on the side it looks like we get new answer 2 log doing our cost we definitely what is supposed worse to least it's arbitrary arbitrary itself sorry 2 so it's first kind of like space placement because if the just make a room and 3 doesn't itself get the picture to the benefit case. Top level game overcoming issue ever seen one of their cars outweighed by the recent commercial space strategy. It means the emphasis on inherent space forces, new commercial space after revitalized US legislative government partnership, commercial industry, leading to innovation. Also, solving all their issues, to the OST, USSF, 14. There's only a chance that the EU is better. The microgravity innovation impact code. 20. Do the include both of marketing, sport, and always good understand every national good effective or evenly distributed market card distributed the project unprofitable to long-term and too risky. So it's responsible for the public budget items, the effects of one minimum monthly further against one the pressure public actually limited not the offer marketing card applications space call extension not level blade drop 2 warrants 1 human watchman and university and search for capacity to cover humans predict Chris standard time and that's all longer they also completely draw a mess handled that one psychological damage side space that's really unfortunate radiation UV rays X-rays gamma rays are all equivalent to a 30 you can just take concrete every wall and every astronaut survival is physically impossible. No addiction can solve that too. Psychological stress, slice error results in total cure annihilation, absent alpha astronaut. That's extra and surge failure, that's extra. And the I can see cyber the cyber text out the satellites now it's trying to like pollution exceeds something like listen based environmental catastrophe against the public carbon body lost like it was keeps what sleep pattern reproduce comprehensive mouse with over 150 favorites includes the biggest impact that's burger on a corporate it turns case one innovation and like pollution from satellites data to innovation misguided can't detect adversaries the evidence concedes the link and impact once again the 20 respect to be small satellite log I should now say reflect maybe phrase and like whatever like without space like pollution by harvesting environment economy market card economy and advantage two the diplomacy advantage inquiry and consular says OC with clouds or credibility matters conceded that hotline solve existing like hotlines any isolating space from salary tax specifically exists between great powers like US and China and Russia and any other nation that's 0.15 no international fall they drop that corresponding advantage one innovation one peak global conceded that recent war that Trump and his tariffs that US credibility cooperation over any area which means that would not be modeling this other evidence the OC credibility is not key to democracy diplomacy other here to show avenues they dropped negotiation works better in this as for this the Hickman 7 evidence and space war collapse satellites absent that usually probably also have to in the scenario in some text and already in place part of advocating against
How far is that?
years switching.
Good for us?
Yeah.
Okay, first on the Concon, you say currently the this is still perceived as government action, where the constitutional convention not be perceived as government action.
The constitutional convention will perceived as state action because the states are doing it through the constitutional convention. It's only the states doing the action. Like the government has no, like obviously the government would have to enforce it,
All
but the
50
states are doing it, so it would not be blamed on anyone else.
Okay, but the federal government would still implement the patent policy, it would just be causing the state.
Because the states would pass an amendment requiring it.
All 50 states agree to the
Blame all the
amendment.
states. Well,
Do all 50 states agree to the amendment?
we ratified, yeah, 3/4 as much as is necessary to have a limited constitutional convention.
Okay, why would it cause national problem?
Because it is an amendment and they have to follow it. And then
Okay,
also,
but they wouldn't implement the plan afterwards.
I mean, the threat of a convention also results in follow
Okay. On the commercialization advantage, you said that, the limited budget makes colonization impossible. Why is that not uniqueness for us and that patents are necessary?
Well, they don't, like, even if they have patents, they don't have money to invest in it. Like, they're not, like, even if there are patents, they're still limited budgets. They're not gonna invest in like microgravity technology.
Okay, I want to move to the UN timeline. You said that it would cause, say no, why?
What would I say now?
You said.
I mean, okay, the idea is that there's other countries like China who we attempt to have a like diversified like patent system, but they have a centralized patent system. And they would not follow on because their patent system is so different from ours.
Okay,
We're
why
in
would
that-
they follow on from the UN?
Because the UN treaty is tailored to them, forcing China to comply,
Okay,
like
how
expecting China to comply
would
with our
Hillary
domestic.
China change the tax policy?
They wouldn't change the apps policy, like it solves sufficiently within the United States, but also just give leeway for other countries through that treaty to adopt their own versions of the policy.
Okay, so you're establishing a UN treaty that does the same thing as the act in the United States, but would let other countries change it however they would want to?
I mean, it's a treaty through the UN, it's very distinct from what the app is.
Right, I'm asking you to explain what the treaty would involve. Other countries.
I mean, other countries, that's how they decide they want to comply with the treaty, like how they will comply. So we read evidence that they will comply. But like, it depends. I can't like outline how every single country will comply because it's different. These countries vary. They have different systems, different patent systems, different space policies.
Okay, the Howard part that you read, it says. Okay, I'm gonna take back before the. We had.
Good. Can we take a second to ask your question?
Us, yeah.
Or we take, yeah. Research reactor just condo plus the chemicals bad and limited compound bad, right? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, the order is gonna be tax cuts VA, managed counterplay, necessity counterplay. And it's set, so just something. Yeah, tax cuts VA. Advantage counterplay and necessity.
Then what, sorry?
Advantage counterplay necessity. We order not ready.
I guess I'm sorry.
Okay. Tax cuts are key to competitors of China's with evidence as lighting tax cuts is 5 US into an R&D recession that crushes $70 billion in R&D funding makes us not competitive with China in tech leadership that causes immediate nuclear war correlates with China as soon as they perceive they have a comparative tech advantage. Believe they can overtake the South China Sea or Taiwan chain, which draws a great power wars and crosses the global nuclear war. The TH the case of tax cuts are key to space colonization, winning to 24. What was economic social space tax cuts? Commercial pass tax, increased controls, liquid, so not a little bit of rocket ship, lunar lander, staff, kind of the cover, visual space tax, law, small launch companies, the cost of launching into orbit, the administration into tax increase around the virtual fund, space out power, commercial space companies, taking on both of the world and limited possibilities, physical space, upper go out of tax fairness. On Tuesday, one of the parathelmic process was real here, line 0, so that Trump was prioritizing analogies, which is what matters in power passes during this congressional session that would happen after the passage of cash notes, just because Trump encouraged it to be participating now, and passage will take 2 years. Tuesday, Mitchell et al. 211, all agreed. We might hit Congress in that time, I think it was going to take more, a little under 2 years. Tuesday 2, the uniqueness evidence is relevant. The House budget or the budget blueprint passing proves Republicans can get on board. Republicans barely passed the resolution in that House and are 38 needles for reconciliation in the Senate, maintaining political cloud is key to benefit the evidence. Evidence is actually older, just updated, but it never said that it was describing that the budget blueprint would pass, but it did, which just proves that the union's claim. And GOP holdouts are going, which one PC is key to maintaining unity. Evidence in 410. House like the Liberals slash tax growth, looking at the pushing the Democratic opposition. There was the initial House Republicans came into Trump's the public Russia were relative after receiving promises from Trump, and 2P still the betting came in to secure passage Trump Hall, secure party and loyalty. Berman 410. We feel so bad against progressive Republicans. The weeks that I want to have the passage, pressure path for Trump's general being 10 president. We're going to like showing loyalty and policy and defer with the unions. Evidence on evidence post states there. Students here with the terrorist number, no. Trump didn't have to use PC because he failed with the executive order to prove the effectiveness of Trump's PC anyways, because every Republican in the House and Senate fell in line to support the terrorists. There was no broad like outcry from the Republicans in the caucus, and it doesn't cost a capital until it's the finish line. John 10. Republican political lies work until it becomes act opposite to help performance balance to along which one's active, which migrants take that. They should polling will say something different. Immigration background is when you show them actually the all Republicans. Tuesday 4, they said IPR is bipartisan, but the Stewart Colonel says there might be some bipartisan IPR ways that Trump could pursue. Not that the plan is one of them. It's also not specific to patents at all. Patents stack PC comes political special provisions that heavily widely against such areas. As long as makers think IPR strong now and don't need to touch it. And Nelson also isn't specific to space either. And it's only about para, not the avid, and not patents broadly. And outer space space ranches and to the planet spends significant political capital. Back in Bull 22. Sorry, on this basis, discourse sold and successful trying to try much more work, including into double class in the US, and power reform causes political capital includes tackling the agenda. Article 13. Adaptive patterns actually the past program piece of economics and need to enact legislation given many dimensions of relatively political world we must have reforms like to take presidency, massive opportunities, rent seeking custom, potential provisions. There's bipartisan silence for strengthening the opposition of Congress for pushing the weakened protection part next 21. Bipartisan over the review that we actually preserve advantage of bipartisan silence doing anything to bolster yet tomorrow advocating even more advocate. And what means is pattern reform will pass unless Trump priorities it. 25. Pattern reform making targets one of the things likely unless Trump is also making priority. On Tuesday 7 they said we saw through like increasing development of space patents, are totally linked to R&D broadly space in just one very small sector of it, which means it can't solve like the internal link to R&D funding broadly. And Tuesday 8, the Lucy card flips out, this is leading China now, but it doesn't actually the internal link because again, our impact scenario is that like we're leading China now, but the tax cuts crush R&D spending, which makes us fall behind. So it's just making it hard for us. If family's confident concede on the program was tough competition, we're not going for it. Deciding confident concede on the program was tough competition, we're not going for it. Cross confidence is not a voting issue. Cross apply like negation theory and all that. Net ground warrants from condo, and it's a reason to reject the team cost play. Yeah, all budget theory answers. I'm gonna go back to the DA. Mostly already did. Also is out. Consequence would be key to biofarm investment, Bobich at all 25. Or just the public biofarm account markets, resource deposit, bot take a rolling some investment checkers, and emerging source of we can buy chances in the investment market, and that's all Steve. So we'll go back 25. In addition, market goes biofarm, like current parentheses, resource shares, a little bit of concrete medicine, hidden money, have all invested in energy fund, and like a lot of accounts, as well representing, the market most approaches innovation and extinction. Denmark 25. Current dimension of Russell available to be actively legally faces us more than ever before. That change in cash flow, dynamics, plan to manufacture company, how we increase, GRC, hours, and probably stick on future, and
Just like incidents.
yeah, on the Farquhar card, they said natural pandemics are likely to cause human extinction, but the Fenwick card, which is right, talks about how COVID proves we actually are vulnerable because of increased interconnectedness and catastrophic pandemics, and also mutation from GCBRs is what our Fenwick card I just read talks about that. Answer the Farquhar card because it specifically only talks about natural pandemics. Also it's for pandemics for global instability goes Nicholas, GK 21. Pandemics we can decide exactly what the public global globalization, now the virus will be challenged for years to come from after the deflate, precarious systems, to mitigate potential pandemics, these nuclear complex capacity transit, opening on 21st century world, some changes to positive kind of nationalism, related to left over from style, public passing, effective war. Also knows that.
Age, learning.
So we have to go to the model.
Yeah.
Okay.
36.
Go to doc, right?
Yeah.
Alex, question that I can't find.
Yeah. You can talk, you understand.
Actually,
Okay. Alright, I'll make it sorry. I took one out of my bag. I was at home. That was good. Yeah, we brought stands, but then we realized that one of our analysis had taken it to a previous toilet. And they broke one of the lines, so when we opened the stand, we rolled through it. I was so.
usually we're the ones asking about this.
Okay, I think it's a favorite class.
Oh, the strings.
Yeah.
Oh.
Can I not skill?
Oh.
We told
It's
them
not
that.
really-
One thing we don't.
Limited limitations is also wrongly have dropped. None of the alpha previous detected that would overcome the physiological barriers. The impact defense, the impact turn is obviously incoherent. They have dropped our answers first with no link that if satellites no were destroyed, it would obviously cause nuclear war much faster, and then they would be able to get rid of the light pollution. Further, they've also dropped the outlook solve because with the international law, it's a second advantage that the OSC would regulate light pollution, which is the Hamilton part, which means yourself the terminal, space law. Space law gives you weak which is violating by commercializing convention space plan finalizing creating a domestic space patent to the local point of local patent which bring commercial patent to timelines space cooperations can prevent optimization space raise and the corporate global threats like terrorism disasters even for NDCA no national follow on no they have ignored our cards and say that opposite countries want to follow on through the specific mandate of the OSC which they have dropped. They said that the OSC critical is wrong. No, it's the only actual framework that people want to follow on to just has to be reacted. We've also considered the highlight on the highlighting of the power plant, which proves it. See. Cross-fire visibility from T, which was dropped to watch over by ASAP. We don't need to meet the vessel information because obviously when meets information people writing the sufficient based on the quality of office first, which is substance product information to the license made to you with substance of the topic B. This makes a long meaning in terms of the defense smaller and smaller, which is your progressive training of the problem so the base will do. Defense now for some arbitrariness, but it's all reasonable in terms of the most nothing but now we judge dimension A. The song in each of the question is available for the gun confirmation by the determined conditions of B and these uncertainty model to read and result of judges have to determine what the function of T and the expected to that what should we solve T, the UN conflict? The UN conflict, this is they have dropped that the specific mechanism of pattern T. They do not understand how the outforce of the conflict is incoherent. The conflict cannot change laws in space because they go through the UN specific IP system, which means that they cannot revitalize the OST, cannot let the two organize with murder. The US has to do the domestic IP, the Harvard card said they need to get them they need to get them on board. The US just in the conflict is just the US proposing the app of the OST is key because people are already used to that system. It's integrating because of the lack of commercial space ventures because the companies developing products space that are from the OST can facilitate passes creating framework for commercializing space parallels to space formation that you have the evidence and patent protection is specifically necessary to bring inventions to markets in the space industry. And otherwise the company also doesn't solve classic media so the countries are incentivized to join the not registered, stealing with their companies from offshoring and infringement of their tenants, which laws literally all of the weaponization offense. Also, they've dropped the how the businesses of the companies are willing to follow one, but only if the US initiates a system running their IP system, which means that, all this is counterclaim, it's all that, yeah, counterclaim. Conflicts fail when told by the courts gets rolled back to the courts of single in phase two. Courts themselves in the last round of the understanding the part of the maturity amendment is made in the construction and reviews of the harmonized legal structure. What is that for us to be passed? The use to be kind of the city of the harmonized legal architecture. No less important globally advanced the plan process saying no zero plan match treating condition of the plan is on. None of my cycle government plan the impact is follow us global 32. Four of those directions in place commented the signal producing results, but I think it's wrong. It's just not like the government comprehensive. Well, makes it market market access theory. You should reject from the plans place to the entire application. Maybe also the approach to show credibility just because the topic is absolute doesn't necessarily mean that it's not real world means that the next classes there's no African literature and no logical decision and no decision maker is choosing between neither the app or the compact and if you haven't seen interactions but issue goes for we don't get multiple levels of meaning what's not just the just like the plan which is the necessity of the absolute and every single app will be limited except for one Steve politics DA. Politics DA, I'm waiting for them to read a part about the app. You tell me when. The first transparency part, they definitely don't get the part about Biden's tax incentives, which is obviously not about the app, and it's also about the status quo, but opposed to the companies would still have the money to people not to be able to innovate. Yeah, remember they decided to stop Trump's for businesses at the same space website, you will agree that convention rates penalties and strict enforcement of permit that's a monograph and it doesn't matter he's looking involved in the last few years because Trump is ridiculous and will literally say whatever he wants. They will pass up extended can't pass the parliament will pass up indicate you got to monitor and agree this whole structure will be random. The same Jimmy wants to send you raise when Jimmy doesn't also the Senate agree when spending has to be the House will definitely demand these add-on is definitely wrong. They have dropped the impact defense which is trade between the and spreadability sense of infrastructure trying to not got any better than COVID but they have got red light and out which means they don't get to this app.
It's 47 starting. I'll make sure I'm pretty case you want to do that.
Expect Hong Kong politics, you. Failure to specify agent is a voting issue. The impact is ground. They move mechanism. This as in counterplays along the app to arbitrarily pick different actors with bike links and counter competition arguments. Kills fairness and negative engagement on a bi-directional, uncontroversial topic with infinite app ground. Lack of this as uniqueness, working neg, and the hybrid generic side by should be filtered for impact calculus for every single theory argument, especially at the NDCA, where two ways have a monopoly at the literature base and new apps galore. On all of their standards, it would totally drop that there's no new one arguments or cross apps, tech over truth. Even if you do not like A-spec, it is not in your paradigm. I know you can vote on it because you haven't put that in your paradigm, so you have to vote on it. It was dropped. Interpretation, rejecting one of your arguments, and cross-applicating for conceded arguments in the 2EC. When in this TKO was app because the 2EC dropped A-spec and it was in the doc. Preferred one flowing encourage more of a heated, greater engagement in debate and punishing block box. Turns their offense to a sandbag game. Incentivizes not reading the best arguments or dropping full off in the 2EC for baiting purposes and sandbag till the 1 AR kills. Room fairness because it decides that the blocker responding kills at 5. Creates a 5-10 types of kills clashes by causing late debates and because starts intervention. People like speech time for contestation, kill the function of debate. It's also a rebuttal. No new arguments in rebuttal. Such reasonabilities and new cross app. We get to answer it here, but it was also answered in the 2NC at the bottom. The impact turn theory proliferation is good. They teach analytical thinking and force logical comparison over approximate concerns is key to portable skills, enabling us to effectively deliberate on how to make debate better in the long term. Outweighs PCF does not have a substance make good impact, and they also do not have a counter in terms that they can't solve any of their offense. Straight turning the terminal impact. Substantive debates with shitty theoretical norms produce garbage, hyper generic debates that avoid any potential benefit. Solves their offense better by centering the topic. Our model enables us to write better topic papers through repetitively analyzing the cost and benefits of different theory models. It turns all of their offense. They don't have any offense either because there's no offense. Even if they have some bit of defense, it doesn't apply. But either way, we'll keep the defense. They can't solve it. They don't have a counter interp. That means they have no internal link to it. They're arbitrary and stuff. It's not arbitrary. That's all substance crowd out there. Worse, they're even more arbitrary because they don't have our counter interp. It's just this counter plan is okay, which doesn't know whether like our usage of our aspect is okay, but doesn't mean anything. Inevitable, it's obvious, it's not inevitable. We're given an explicit extrapolation as to how they try or die for more negative flexibility and more negative ground. So there's no direction of offense they can get because they can see the uniqueness question that debate is irreversibly skewed towards the affirmative. And then con. Pick the counterclaim will concede it gets struck down. Concom has reason to reject the argument off the team, and it's replied by expected for the right about reasonability, then therefore application cost substance crowd about although we're obviously not conceding substance crowd about if they are right about that. If they also drop the outside bias will wait against standards they go if they extend theory and obviously don't extend substance crowd they're not voting for it. Politics decided concede no link to the app notices. In fact, there's no offense on this flow. EU. UN. The counterplay falls through an international treaty. The UN led by the US, what their own authors advocate for unilateral domestic action fails and non-domestic effective based on innovation. The counterplay results in effectively the same policy with minute differences that the US champion and news follows space policy to the EU. That's Abadido. It's another framing issue. Deficits must be quantifiable. Even if there's slight differences from the OSC, there's no impact to that. But either way, their authors advocate for the counterplay. Just read the evidence. It's extremely negative. Judge K. Their authors advocate for the counterplay. That's the Osvaldo part says there's extreme that there's incompatibility with the OST. If you do domestic rights, which means that they cannot solve with the OST, read the index, read the evidence. I promise you, I don't need to reinvent the wheel because they did not do any specific contextualization on any of it. And their own evidence explicitly advocates for allowing the natural loss of gas led by the UN treaties through the US. You need to do a US-led initiative. Their deficits are extremely unclear. The only one that makes sense is patents keep up. Read the counterclaim text. It has patents in it or evidence that the US can explicitly do patents with the UN. It's an indict of their evidence that says that it's possible domestic IP is not key. We indicted their card that says it is key. That's the Acevedo card net benefit. I don't need one because counterclaim solves better. The app prohibits the counterclaim. They don't have a purview both, but inability net benefits ways to become prior to all space policy and solves better because it leads to better cooperation and zero policy failure. Otherwise, no modeling nations proceed the US aggressively. The counterclaim prevents the app from locking unilateral curse and limiting centralized policy. Otherwise, that curse unique. Lock and extinction as we go to space, only seeing authority logic, body solve prefer our impact calculus, increasing and decreasing X. Risks are uniquely true for space policy because as we enter space, it gets infinitely worse. Every impact is magnified. There's more possibilities for us to go, seeing more human lives at risk. That's the Hamilton evidence, and their own evidence says that succeeding to a Western model is uniquely bad because it ignores other models, which leads to non-collective action and enables every 10 different sources of space-related risks, all of which are existential difference from their innate critique to US domestic action. Second, part of their innate also says space laws are outdated now, but the counterclaim makes them not outdated. And we've also in their Howard evidence, which says that the US established a focal point for other nations to follow too. There's zero distinction between the counterclaim and the affirmative because except for the mechanism that is through the EU.
Yeah.
Commercialization. T.
Yeah, Apple would revital our space pathogen in order to cause our regulatory harmonization with other countries. That is key to promote the OST, which is the only thing standing between us and space weaponization. Our Hennigan card is from a couple months ago and says that the absent OST regulation, Russia and China will weaponize and put ASATs into space, which will quickly cause miscalculation and accidental nuclear war. The key part of that is that it has to be through the OST. The regulatory harmonization only happens through the OST mechanisms. It was established many years ago and specifically bans putting nuclear weapons in space. That means that doing it through that mechanism revitalizes the OST's credibility by making it more promising to other countries. It's collapsing now because the U.S. is violating it by commercializing inventions in space, but creating a space patent regime and creating a focal point would allow other countries in order to follow on and would revitalize the credibility of the OST. That's one easy opportunity. Any other mechanism can't solve because it's only the OST that provides the guidelines that actually ban putting weapons in space, which is our internal link. The commercialization advantage, we're not going for it, but there's no independent offense here because they didn't extend the impact guarantee. The 1AR answers weren't cross application. A-spec was put on the T page. Our reasonability answer on T clearly applied to A-spec, which they didn't counter, which means it wasn't a new or a cross application. They shouldn't have put A-spec on the T page if they didn't want this to happen. They should have made it a separate off-case position. So extend reasonability. We don't have to meet the best of all possible worlds, only one that can provide sufficient ground. And they asserted that the impact was ground, but didn't actually show what ground they have lost, which means you have to believe that we are providing sufficient ground. They functional limits are explicitly extended in the 1AR. Things like prizes, patents, padding, the cap pay insure, they all have some ground against our affirmative, and they don't actually lose anything from agent specification because the best counterclaims would still link, which means creating a race to the bottom is definitely worse. And they should have just asked us in prospect because we would have specified. And I'll extend our offense here. First, up in strata, it allows them to read billions of tiny little theory issues on every page and hide it in order to try and avoid actually debating substance. That is worse. Theory debates aren't good. It's better to have a topic education. That's why we pick the topic each year. Otherwise, we would just have theory debates on how a debate should look. Do you want to judge that all year? It would get repetitive and extend race to the bottom. It incentivizes creating smaller and smaller interps until app debate is extremely limited. That outweighs because no matter how much of an app bias there is, it's better to have a topic education. They didn't extend arbitrariness or judge intervention, but it's not arbitrary because anything can be considered arbitrary, and it's clear that we don't have to specify because it's based on the resolution. Which is the only thing provided before the round, which means we know that it is coming, and so we know that the app is going to extend USFG. That's not arbitrary. It's decided by the topic committee. That definitely turns all their offense because it means that they'll have a better and more substantial ground in a world which the apps are over substance. It doesn't cause judge intervention because everything causes judge intervention. There's no definition of what that actually means. All judges have preferences and apply them in debate, which means reasonability should outweigh. On the UN counterclaim. It is hilarious to read U.S. proposes to UN counterclaim when our impact is literally OST specific. The OST is key to prevent weaponization. It specifically bans putting nuclear weapons in space, and proposing different patents to the UN might boost the UN's credibility, but that does not help with preventing space weaponization. That means Russia and China would lash out. That's a huge deficit to the counterclaim that definitely outweighs their vague as risk. It outweighs on time frame because Hennigan proved that the OST is collapsing now, and only the app can prevent it. We definitely also solve and a benefit because we would still revitalize space cooperation because we would model to other countries, which means which is their only internal link to actually why they would prevent it. They've just badly re-highlighted their cards.
John, I'll sign for that.
Thank you.